Suzi Samuel is the author of The Unintentional Medium and the soon to be published An Unintentional Journey. This is her first foray into fiction and draws largely on her knowledge of France and her own personal experience of the spirit world. Born in England, Suzi spent a large part of her life in Wimbledon, where she worked as a French tutor and translator. After the death of her beloved grandmother, her first husband, and an old clairvoyant lady, Mrs. Butterfield, she started to get very bizarre but accurate messages from the other side, and thus commenced her psychic work, which spans almost 40 years. In 1997, she married her Australian husband, David, and they later moved to Sydney, where she still practices her work as a medium and clairvoyant. Welcome to the Hybrid Author Podcast, Suzi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joanne. Can I just say here, An Unintentional Journey is not yet released. The one that is released is called The Dark at the Threshold, and that's the supernatural one that's set in France.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Well, welcome. We are dying to know, obviously, your bio's fantastic. How does it all tie in? How did you end up writing and in novels?
Well, that is a very good question, actually, because I called the first book The Unintentional Medium because it was really peculiar how it happened. As I said, my grandmother died, my first husband died, and then this lovely old clairvoyant lady I knew died, and she'd said, "You'll be doing what I'm doing one day." And I said, "Don't be so silly old woman." But anyway, I was in a car with a friend going to a tennis tournament, and he was whinging and moaning about how he was so fed up with his job. And in a voice like Moses coming from the mount, I said, "You will be offered a job in a box or a tent at a sporting occasion when the flowers are blooming." And he looked at me and he said, "Christ, you haven't even had a drink. What's wrong?" And I said, "Well," and I was sort of cowering, like a puppy learns to bark and doesn't quite know where it's coming from. And I'm sort of, "Oh God, what's going on?" So anyway, this 6 months later, we were at the Queen's tennis tournament, and he said, "Hey, guess what? I'm being headhunted." And I said, "Oh, really?" And he said, "Yes, I'm having lunch with the CEO of this company in the marquee on finals day." And we were surrounded by roses. And I more or less fell into the roses. When they dragged me out and replenished the champagne, his girlfriend said, "Well, maybe what you told me will come true." And I said, "Oh, Jesus, what have I told you?" And it actually came true. And it started from there. So I started off as a clairvoyant, and I worked at that for quite a long time. So I can't remember the exact year, but about 18 years ago, David, he had a secret plan. I didn't realize this, but he brought me on a few softening up holidays to Australia. And a friend gave me a travel notebook. I mean, can you imagine how frightfully English, a travel notebook, So anyway, I'm going around Australia making little notes about things and thinking, "Oh, well, maybe there's a book in me." Who knows? There's a book in everyone, they say. Got back and found I had breast cancer. And said, "No, it's perfectly all right." But I had to have radiotherapy. So while I was lying on the slab, being sort of pulled around like a bendy bunny, I was rehearsing the first lines of this book in my head. And suddenly I'm lying there, and this same Moses on the Mount voice says, "Wrong book." And I'm looking all around this room thinking, where the heck's this come from? And they said, "Write about what you know." And so I started this. That was The Unintentional Medium. That was the first one. An Unintentional Journey, which we mentioned, is the prequel to The Unintentional Medium. It's not a psychic book, but it's a memoir. Yeah. And everybody who's read it said it's very funny, because I'm the sort of person that things happen to, So that was more or less all ready to go. Well, it was going to the printers the very next day. And meanwhile, I'd got this figure in my head. Well, I kept being told a figure, 1468. Well, it's not exactly 1066 or 1939, is it? Or, you know, and I thought, what is this 1468? And it wasn't 1468, it was definitely 1468. So I Googled it, and the only thing that happened in that year was that the then Pope made witchcraft a criminal offence.
Wow.
And I thought, hello, somebody's trying to tell me something. And I did live in France for a while, and I've spent a lot of time in France. And I used to work as a translator and a teacher. So I thought, there's something going on here. So I started writing The Dark at the Threshold, right? And it was almost as if somebody else was writing it. I know that sounds daft, but it was, I mean, even when I was asleep at night, somebody would wake me up and say, go and write. And I'd say, no, go away. No, no, go and write. No, clothes over your head, you know, poke, 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 poke. Get up and write. I promise I'll write in the morning. No, right now. And so anyway, I swear that there was somebody with me all the time I was writing this. And literally the day before An Unintentional Journey was due to go to the typesetter, I typed the end to this book. And David, my husband, said, oh my God, we've got to leapfrog this. And he said, we really have got to push this book forward. And so, working on the principle that more people would like to read a supernatural thriller than read the memoirs of a dotty old woman, we went ahead with that. So that's basically how the books were written. I do hope that answered your question. I went on for an awful long time. But
Like, yeah, the more organic conversation, the better. Yeah, no, I absolutely did. And a few questions sort of come to mind. And I suppose, like with your clairvoyancy, and you know, you knew Mrs. Butterfield and she passed, and she had that message for you. And then that's when you started having like these sort of voices and things like that after that.
after she died, yes, it must have been a year or so after she died
Right.
that started. She was a very determined old lady.
Because I was just thinking, you know, if that's your past, that you had a clairvoyant friend and you sort of sought that help, and then you had that message, and then you got the voices. Because in my mind, if it was the other way round and I started having the voices, I might think, am I going mad?
Exactly. Well, honestly, Joanne, that happens sometimes because people will pop in. And there's one person, David used to be quite involved in politics in England, and there's one person who's pretty well known from the political past who popped into our kitchen one morning while we were having breakfast. And I'm thinking, no, can't be, can't be, you know, and I'm sort of looking all shifty. It just can't be. And so I passed some messages on to David that I couldn't possibly have known because these people were friendly and I couldn't possibly have known. And he said, oh my God, it really was. So, you know, I question a lot of the time. And I get weird messages. And sometimes when I'm in a reading, I'll get some really weird messages. And I'll say, does this mean anything to you? And they'll say, oh God, yes. And I'll say, well, thank God, because I don't know what I'm talking about, you know. So yes, it is a bit odd.
It's very interesting. It is, yeah. But that's amazing that, you know, this is all sort of tied together and it's guiding your writing, and that's fantastic. We've said today we're going to talk about your new book, you know, The Dark at the Threshold, as well as topic about revising a bestseller. So we'll start with The Unintentional Medium. So
Okay.
that was the bestseller that you've decided to do a revised edition?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. Why did you decide it's already a book that's done mightily well as a bestseller, and yeah, now you're doing the revise. What was that?
Well, it was a couple of things, really. This is a chicken and egg situation. I'm not quite sure which came first. But when I had this published, first of all, I went with I'm choosing my words a bit carefully here. I went with a company in America. I had a publisher here, but she worked with a company in America. And I didn't have a copy editor. Is that right? I didn't have an editor I had a line copy editor, which, didn't need a lot of work, but I should have had a proper editor work on it. So when the reviews came in, that was on Amazon, when the reviews came in, the professional reviewers on Amazon made the point that it jumped around time-wise and it was disjointed, right? So I thought that when I started working with my publicist, Nicole Webb, on The Dark, she said, well, look, I think that we should also push the unintentional medium as well at the same time again. And I said, well, it's a bit disjointed, it's a bit funny. And I said, right, I'm going to rewrite it. I'm just going to jig it around a bit. And also the other thing was that we were having some copyright problems with this company in America. Right. So rather than, it all got a bit complicated. So rather than go into that, I thought, you know what? The easiest thing is just to rewrite it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's not really terribly different stories or anything. That will be in other books and part of it in The Unintentional Journey and things. But it's more just getting it chronologically better. So much working with professional editors now. And it's just, I hope, sort of glossed it up a bit and smoothed the rough edges, if you like.
Yeah.
So that's why I wrote it.
Even though they're different, like the fiction and then supernatural thriller and like the unintentional medium, but they do kind of all tie the same. So I get Nicole's reasoning there for them to be pushed together.
Yes.
So.
Yes. But it was a bit of a shock going into fiction because I'd never even tried it before. It was great. I mean, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I'd lie awake at night. I mean, the main characters are called Claire and Robert, but I'd lie awake thinking, I wonder what Claire and Robert will do now. I wonder what they'll do next. And it was almost like they took on their own personae, it was very strange.
So you said you had that sort of voice that gave you that date. And I have to say, when I read that date, what was it, 14, 16? 14?
68.
Yeah, 68. And that, even I thought 14, 68, that is really specific, and you don't really read a lot of books set that time.
I'm quite nutty about anything to do with the Plantagenets and the Tudors, but I never heard that date. I was thinking, what the heck is that? Other dates, yes, but it was very specific.
Yeah.
And I find that if the spirit world do want to get through, they are like a Jack Russell. They will not leave it alone until I do something,
Yeah. So you were given that, and then you saw what had happened and things that day. And so is that what set you on the path to writing The Dark?
Yes, absolutely. Just that one little thing.
Yep.
I was at a conference with my husband, and I suddenly had this idea, and I was grabbing napkins and writing this preface out. And I wrote the preface to it on these napkins at this conference because it just came to, it was a bit of a boring conference, so I had time to think.
Well, not so boring. You got that good idea and wrote it on a napkin.
Yes.
I've heard the best ideas are on napkins as well. The guy from The Barefoot Investor, the financial guy,
yes.
I think he wrote all his stuff on napkins as well. So. Before the iPhone with the note. Yeah. So have you had any other messages? You said it sort of felt like it wrote itself. You had someone guiding you the whole way. What other experiences of your own have you put in there?
Well, it is a little bit autobiographical in that David and I went to France, bought a big old rundown pile, converted it into flats, and also a lot of it is based on my own psychic experiences, because for some reason I've had a lot of contact with the dark side. I mean, totally unwanted, totally uncalled for, but from places I've been to, houses I've lived in, whatever. And so a lot of the actual threat, if you like, I've actually experienced. And it's it's partly written, I don't know if this is conscious or not, all right, but what I do feel is that I need to get the message across to people. Sorry, I'm getting a bit serious now. I need to get the message across to people that meddling is very, very dangerous. You don't know what you can stir up. And I think now it's quite fashionable for people to. I was looking at reading an article in a magazine the other day about how in England it's very fashionable now to have this interest in witchcraft and ghosts and stuff like that. And I really wanted to try and get across that it is dangerous to meddle, and that the dark is always there. And so if you don't protect yourself and you don't know what you're doing, you can let it in.
Yeah.
So I guess that was just, sorry, that was a bit
Oh,
serious.
that's, yeah, I mean, it's
I
all
guess
part of
that
it,
was just another thing. And it's also, it's a love story. There are places, a lot of the places I describe I've been to. They've got different names, but I've been to them. And also the cooking is all part of it as well. The food, it's all part of me. So it is pretty autobiographical.
yeah, yeah. So there's a bit of fact in there, but it's presented as fiction, which is great.
Yeah.
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 No, that's amazing. I love that. And I think the dark at the threshold, even the title, where did the title come from? Just, yeah, from there.
Well, actually, it came from, it had a working title of The Following Dark. And most people said, one girlfriend said, that's wonderful. Everybody else, including David, said, God, no, that's awful. And so I wanted to get the dark in it because I refer to evil as the dark all the way through the book. And so we threw ideas around and there it was. And the sequel is called The Long Tentacles of the Dark.
Ooh, oh, I like that. Are you
Which is set in England, not in France.
are you working on that right now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Are you quite far in or?
No, not terribly, because we've been doing a lot of work on publicizing the books, and it's not that long since I finished. Oh gosh, it's only Christmas I finished rewriting The Unintentional Medium, so it's not that long. But I've started it. I'm a few chapters in,
Yeah.
so.
That's amazing. So the unintentional medium you've rewritten, that's
Yes.
the end for that book now, that you don't feel like there'll be another revised vision after
Oh,
that one.
no. There might be like as I've got older, more things have happened. So there could be the unintentional medium part 2 or something.
Second edition, third edition.
But that's.
Yeah, yeah. And for anyone wanting to, obviously your reasons for revising that book were there was some copyright issues and some chronological stuff. But anyone looking to revise works that have already gone out there and they've done okay, do you have any advice for anybody looking to do that? Like while you were revising it, maybe there was some stuff that came up you thought,
Well, um,
or even in the first place, well, I guess for yourself, I was going to say in the first place, so you wouldn't have to revise it. But our stories are a little bit similar. That the first book I put out in my first year of uni, and I always say this, and my listeners be like, "Oh, she's talking about that again." I was in such a hurry to get it out, and I had some people read it over and things and proofread it, but didn't go with a professional editor.
exactly.
Like lesson learned, isn't it?
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. And the way I revised it, I obviously had it on the computer. So I printed it off and I put the chapters all over my dining room table, right? Every chapter, laid it out in chapters. And I had a look at it. I mean, my poor husband, we didn't have a dining table for a couple of weeks. We had supper on our knees, sort of thing. But anyway, I had all these papers on the dining room table and I'd look and I'd think, okay, so that refers to that. Or where was I in my life when this happened? Because I think I tried to get it more in categories almost than chronological order. And so for me, the way I did it was just swap it around and stand there and have a look physically and see where it was, because I'm a very old lady now and I'm really not very good with computers. So, it was much easier for me to do that. But I think if you I don't know what you feel, but if I feel when you get further into writing and you work with incredibly good editors and you see what they do,
Yeah, it's
and
amazing.
they actually say to you, look, the one for An Unintentional Journey was a lovely lady called Bernadette Foley, and she'd put little notes in and
Yeah, we've had her on the podcast actually
oh,
from Broadcast Books.
that's it. She's absolutely
Amazing. Yeah, she's
oh,
great.
oh, oh. And she would say things like, okay, you've mentioned David, but you haven't even met him yet. And things, so nobody knows who he is because I would jump forward and things like, and so just little things like that. And Kate Stevens, who did The Dark at the Threshold, is also absolutely fantastic. And working with her as well, you seem to get a feel a little bit for, I mean, God knows I could have probably done with them editing and unintentional medium. It's just, I
It's
don't know,
an
osmosis.
evolving process. Yeah, you learn as you go.
Yes, yes. So,
So getting editor first up would be your.
yes, yeah.
No, that's good. And when you're first starting out, if you don't have that sort of guidance or anything, and you are kind of learning as you go, as you say, you can just incorporate it later on.
Yes,
That's
yes.
so no,
So
that's
it's probably still lacking a bit, but it's I'm happy with it now.
yeah. Oh, I think they say a book's never done, and we could change it and change it and change it forever. So yeah.
I know I've got a friend who's a writer and he's been writing this book for donkey's years. And I said, oh my God, you'd be like Flaubert with Madame Bovary. I said, I just hope you're not in the bathhouses in Marrakesh.
Hilarious. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So we'll be back to the Dark at the Threshold. So it's all going very well, the promotion of it, and how is it being received?
Well, at the risk of sounding a bit conceited, and I'm being English, I hold back on this because I have this horror of sounding conceited, but everybody who's read it is just raving about it.
Amazing.
And that's professionals. That's not just my nearest and dearest who say, oh, darling, it's so wonderful. You're so clever. You
Yeah.
know, but people who've actually, the professionals who've read it say it's absolutely fantastic. And I'm thinking, what? But
You're like,
anyway, I will let the readers be the judge of that.
yeah, amazing. Well, can you please tell us where our listeners can find the unintentional medium and the dark at the threshold, and where can they find everything that you do online?
Okay, so at the moment they're available through my website, which is www.theunintentionalmedium.com. And you can just go there, press on PayPal, and you'll get it as soon as the post allows. So
Fantastic.
it will be on Kindle very soon as well. We're working on that too.
Amazing. And then you've got book two in the pipeline. Will that be this year, next year, do you think?
Oh, this year.
This year as well. Yeah.
This year, yes, definitely. There is a little bit of a cliffhanger at the very end of the book, so hopefully we'll go on and see what happens to them in England. So,
Yeah, yeah. Do you see this as expanding into more of like a series type thing from here, or?
oh, I'd love it to be. I would really love it to be. I feel I've got two series going on, one about memoirs. And then a friend of mine said, oh, you should do a book of short stories about things that have happened to you. And I thought, oh my God, I'll be writing forevermore.
Oh, no, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Suzi, for coming on and telling us about it and sharing your experiences. We can tell from your enthusiasm and your voice and things that everybody's going to be extremely interested to go out and read your books.
I do hope so.
No, that was amazing. Thanks, Suzi.
Thank you so much, Joanne.